and it's obviously something that my colleague Darragh O'Brien has been pushing for some time in the Dáil and produced legislation in relation to it. And of course, any move in relation to rent control in student accommodation or any accommodation requires legislation. Now, the funny thing about this week, when the government gives some indication that they're going down this route, they can't legislate because the Dáil is in recess. And that's a big question for us. Why has this been left till now? Why signals have been sent to the market the week after the Dáil goes in recess? Doesn't seem like a serious attempt to us at all. Darragh O'Brien here beside me has already introduced legislation in the Dáil. This is available to the government. They hemmed and hawed about this. They said there were legal difficulties. They had to get the Attorney General's advice. And hey presto, there's a press conference or a bit of news is required without any substance. An announcement is made, and that makes us deeply cynical. The government set very low targets for student accommodation. They're exceeding those targets. They need to redouble their efforts, not only to deal with the rental issue, but also to make sure that more student accommodation comes on, because that's actually how you will reduce rents and make student life affordable once again in this country. I'll just hand you over to Darragh.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Look, I suppose the thing is, we all know of cases that students have actually had to make a decision in some instances of whether to continue in college or to be when they've been unable to pay rent. And we've seen all the cases around 30, 40, 50% increases in student rents. So we published a bill as a party back in May, which defined what purpose-built student accommodation was, which very clearly said we can bring these under the rent pressure zones and control the rents that students are actually paying. Now, I'm a little bit bewildered, as Thomas has outlined, as to when we do that, and I've had that discussion with Minister Murphy. We were supposed to have a rent control bill in before the recess. That didn't happen. It was another target not met by government. That now, after the event, we're saying, you know what, we might actually do this. And we genuinely have a concern that it would send a signal to the market that these rents are going to be brought in under rent control, so now off you go, do whatever you want for the next few months, set the bar even higher, and we don't want that to happen. What we would be asking of government is, well, give us a time frame. We've been very constructive on this. We've said we want to improve the lot for students, we want to make their rents affordable. So okay, if you're going to do it, when are you going to do it? We'll facilitate it if it's along the lines of the bill that we have published, and we'll make sure that it's done very, very quickly. And it can be done before the next semester starts, if there's a real will. So we want to see if there's any substance behind another government announcement that we got down in Kerry.
What I say is, like, we have a record in education and indeed in housing of, if there's something good happening, we'll facilitate it. And we saw down at DIT and the New Technological University the other day, that cooperation that was there because we helped get that legislation through. But we also know, in that particular case as well, that institutes of technology don't have the power to borrow in their own right. So effectively, any student accommodation down there is actually going through a particular procedure that means the cost of borrowing is higher than it should be, than it would be for universities. So there's an issue there about institutes of technology and their borrowing powers that needs to be dealt with as well, to improve the lot of students and to enable them to put accommodation into their institutes.
Thomas, this is the second of our student rebuilding in Ireland programme. I think for government under enough pressure to deliver the crisis.
Maybe Darragh would answer that as our housing spokesman.
I think look, rebuilding Ireland, if you look at any of the targets that have been set, government haven't met them. We've put forward very detailed. I've published 6 pieces of legislation since I took over in housing. My predecessor Barry Cowan did as well. There's things that we can do. We need an affordable housing scheme. We need more social homes. We need to start utilising state-owned land. We know there's 3,008 hectares of state-owned land across the country, zoned, serviced, ready to go. Nothing's happening. All we're getting is announcement and re-announcement. I would ask government to use maybe the second anniversary of Rebuilding Ireland to actually focus on a couple of things that can be done, instead of launching and relaunching the programmes and rebranding them. Like, this is a crisis, and housing is a crisis. There's not a family in this country that's not affected by it, be that homelessness, be that rent, be that exorbitant mortgage rates, and we're not making any progress. So I would really say that, have we put them under enough pressure? I think we have. Have we been constructive? We have tried to be, and we will continue to be. And I would ask government to proceed now with re-establishing fully an affordable housing scheme, to set ambitious targets to deliver social homes, and to do what they said they would do, is to take the 4,000 kids that are homeless in emergency accommodation and to give them homes, and the over 10,000 people now that are actually homeless as well. I think government have been, in many respects, sort of just caught up on the presentation of this. Like, we've had situations in certain counties where we've had more press releases issued in 13 counties of this country than houses built. That's the fact of it. So they need to get their act together. We will be ensuring that this budget is a housing budget and that the focus of the upcoming budget is a housing budget, and we will continue to be constructive and responsible as a party in that regard.
Yesterday's announcement on the rent pressure zones in relation to student accommodation is a typical example of the announcement first, maybe act later approach of this government. And I think they really need to start acting, and the public are depending on them for that, and we'll be examining that in the election whenever that does happen.
Would you agree that the whole plan needs to be abandoned, as Sinn Féin is saying?
Which, the Rebuilding Ireland
Yeah.
plan? No, I think there's elements of the plan that make sense. You see, Sinn Féin will just say, well, we'll just tear it all down, and that has been what they've been doing for a long number of years. The fact of the matter is, there are social housing targets that need to be met that are in there. There's affordable housing targets, there's rental targets. So there's things that could work if there was a focus on it. It's not a question of ripping it up. It's a question of actually refocusing on things that can be done and quickly. And people on the ground want to see progress now. Like, I don't know how many times you as a press corps have been down in O'Devany Gardens or Oscar Traynor Road at announcement and re-announcement by government. People want to see houses built, and they want to see void apartments and boarded up apartments in this city and the cities across the country opened up with people living in them. So it's not a question of saying, you know what, tear it up and start again. We know what needs to be done. I think there's a political will for that to happen. There certainly is from a Fianna Fáil perspective. We're solutions focused as a party. Sinn Féin can answer for themselves, and you'll be the judge of that. But we want solutions, and we want solutions to the housing crisis.
Derek, I'll just ask you another issue. You probably oversee local government as well, spokesman. Joan Freeman has written to county councils and city councils asking for their support to listen to her vision for the presidency.
Okay.
She's the third person, top of Jared Crockwell as well as Kevin Sharkey, to seek a route through to the presidency race through councils. Will Fianna Fáil facilitate these people to go forward for nomination as Fianna Fáil did, councillors did in the last presidential election?
Well, firstly, our parliamentary party made a very clear, I'll answer your question, unanimous decision that we support the re-election of President Michael D. Higgins. Our councillors and our party leader said it last week, is that councillors will be open to make up, we're about stability. If he wants to talk of instability, I think you've got to go and ask him why he's doing that.
Just in relation to the Facebook revelations this week, the Taoiseach has suggested that perhaps it's time to look at fines associated with your company. Do you think that's worthwhile? And do you have confidence that this government would actually pursue legislation?
It's another example of Leo just saying something off the top of his head, speaking as a commentator. He might as well be a columnist in a newspaper offering his opinion. He's someone who can do something. No disrespect to columnists newspapers. That's their role. But the Taoiseach,
Just saying.
The Taoiseach, the columnists are important, but the Taoiseach can actually act and do something. So, I mean, if he wants to be Taoiseach, let him be Taoiseach and do something about it. There is a proposal there to have a digital safety commissioner put in place, and they've hemmed and hawed about that again. At one point they didn't want it, and now they say, well, we will do it, and where is it? And it's not a question of being anti-social media. We're all in favour of social media. It's a question of regulating industries. Pretty much all industries are regulated. Television is regulated, radio is regulated, newspapers are regulated to an extent as well. So that's all we're looking for. And I think it's reasonable that be done. And I think it's about time the government actually took action on this, instead of being, we can be respectful, we can understand the economic importance of Facebook, and I, more than most, have a big operation in my own constituency. But it doesn't mean that you fawn over people or that you say you don't need to be regulated. There are rules and regulations applying to every single industry. If a chemical company wants to set up in Ireland, they're subject to very serious regulation, planning, EPA. Why can't social media companies be subject to similar regulation that will only help their platforms, and more importantly help our citizens, and particularly our children?
Jess, as member of the Republican Party, can you understand why 7 Republican MPs would want to take the seats in Westminster at a time when they could be crucial in deciding not to take votes?
Well, I think people cannot understand why they're not there. SDLP and various nationalists over the years went into Westminster, sometimes only voted on important issues. I think people in this country are scratching their head at Brexit votes going through by 3 votes, which could be hugely damaging to this country when Sinn Féin have that number of MPs in the north of Ireland that could be in Westminster. I think they need to reassess this very, very urgently, because the future of this island is at stake. And certainly if I had an influence, I know I would be there trying to influence Brexit.